What if I told you that in 1971, a dying car company built a V8 engine that could embarrass Chevrolets and Fords on the Dragstrip, yet almost nobody remembers it exists? This is the story of American Motors Corporation's 401 cubic inch V8, an engine that on paper looked average with just 335 horsepower, but in reality delivered quarter-mile times that made the big three sweat bullets. Picture this. It's a Saturday night at Orange County International Raceway in 1972. A bone-stock AMC Javelin AMX pulls up to the line next to a Plymouth Roadrunner with the legendary 440 six-pack. The crowd snickers. Poor guy doesn't know what he's in for. The tree drops green. 14 seconds and change later, the AMC crosses the finish line first. The Plymouth driver demands to see what's under the hood, convinced he just got hustled by some kind of hemi-swapped sleeper. But no, it's just an AMC 401, the most underestimated big block V8 of the muscle car era. And Shannon, the AMC 401 V8 wasn't supposed to exist. By 1970, American Motors was hemorrhaging money, their market share had dropped below 4%, and the muscle car wars were dominated by engines with legendary names, the 454 LS6, the 440 six-pack, the 429 Cobra Jet. AMC was the perpetual underdog, the company that survived on clever engineering because they couldn't afford brute force. Yet somehow, in their darkest financial hour, they created a 401 cubic inch monster that would become their most valuable engine ever built. To understand why the 401 mattered, we need to travel back to 1970, when AMC was facing extinction. General Motors sold more Chevelle in a month than AMC sold cars all year. Ford and Chrysler were engaged in a cubic inch arms race, stuffing bigger and bigger engines into anything with wheels. AMC had already developed their 390 V8 back in 1968, but it wasn't enough. The company needed something that could compete with the big blocks from Detroit, but they had about 1/10 the development budget. Most companies would have given up. AMC's engineers said, watch this. And the problem wasn't just building a big engine. Anyone could bore and stroke their way to displacement. The challenge was creating something that could match or beat the competition while meeting increasingly strict emission standards, delivering reasonable fuel economy, and being reliable enough for AMC's reputation. Oh, and they had to do it with existing tooling because there was no money for new manufacturing equipment. The engineering team had 18 months and a budget that GM probably spent on executive lunches. And sman, the foundation of the 401 started with AMC's existing 390 block, but that's where the similarities ended. The engineers increased the bore from 4.165 inches to 4.165 inches. Wait, that's the same. The magic was in the stroke. They took it from 3.574 inches to 3.680 inches, gaining those crucial 11 cubic inches. But here's where it gets interesting. Instead of just making things bigger, AMC's engineers completely reimagined the engine's breathing and bottom end. None in the heads were the 401's secret weapon. AMC's engineers developed what they called dog-leg exhaust ports, a design that looked wrong but flowed right. The intake ports were massive, 2.02-inch intake valves and 1.68-inch exhaust valves. The combustion chambers were redesigned for optimal flame propagation. The result? These heads flowed better than many racing heads of the era. We're talking about 270 CFM on the intake side and 190 CFM on the exhaust at 0.500-inch lift. For comparison, the vaunted Chrysler 440 six-pack heads flowed 260 CFM intake and 180 CFM exhaust. AMC's engineers had just out-engineered Chrysler with a fraction of the budget. In Unchen, the bottom end was built like a bank vault. Forged steel crankshaft, forged steel connecting rods, and cast aluminum pistons with a 9.5.1 compression ratio. That compression was conservative for 1971, but it meant the engine could run on regular gas when everyone else required premium. The main bearings were massive, 2.7468 inches compared to 2.50 inches on a small block Chevy. The engine featured a windage tray to control oil movement and a high-volume oil pump that could maintain 60 psi at hot, idle. Now, let's talk about that horsepower rating. 335 horsepower gross, which translated to 255 net when the SAE changed measurement standards in 1972. Everyone fixated on those numbers and dismissed the engine. Big mistake. Those ratings were conservative to the point of being misleading. Independent dyno tests in period magazines showed the 401 actually producing closer to 375 gross horsepower. But even those numbers don't tell the real story. The 401 produced peak horsepower at just 5,000 RPM and maximum torque, all 430 pound-feet of it, at 3,400 RPM. Think about that. Maximum twist at 3,400 RPM. The torque curve was so flat you could use it as a carpenter's level. From 2,000 to 5,000 RPM, the engine never dropped below 380 pound-feet. This wasn't a peaky race engine that needed to be wound out. This was a stump puller that happened to rev.nen, and the camshaft specifications revealed AMC's philosophy. Duration was 264 degrees intake, 276 degrees exhaust, with 0.458-inch lift on both. Moderate by racing standards, but perfectly matched to the heads and compression ratio. The overlap was minimal, which helped with emissions and idle quality. This engine would purr at 650 RPM idle, then launch you into next week when you mash the throttle. But specifications don't win races, performance does. And the 401's performance was shocking. A 1971 Javelin AMX with the 401 and close ratio 4-speed could run the quarter mile in 14.3 seconds at 98 miles per hour. With the automatic transmission, it ran 14.5 at 96. These were times that matched or beat cars with much more advertised horsepower. A 1971 Plymouth Roadrunner with the 383 and 4-speed ran 14.6 seconds. A Ford Torino Cobra with the 429 Cobra Jet ran 14.5. The AMC was right there with them, sometimes beating them. 0 to 60 happened in 6.5 seconds with the 4-speed 6.8 with the automatic. Top speed was electronically limited to 125 miles per hour, but remove the limiter and these engines would pull to 140. The engine's broad power band meant you could leave it in third gear from 20 to 90 miles per hour and never feel like you needed another ratio. Let me put that in perspective. This was an engine from a company on the brink of bankruptcy, developed in a year and a half, that could embarrass engines from companies with 10 times the resources. And it did it while getting 14 miles per gallon on the highway. A 454 Chevelle got 10. A 440 Charger got 11. The AMC got 14 and still ran mid-14s in the quarter, tennised in the 401, powered 3 main performance models. The Javelin AMX was the flagship, the car that carried AMC's performance reputation. Only 2,054 were built with the 401 in 1971. The 2-seat AMX had been discontinued after 1970, but the Javelin AMX carried on the name. The Matador received the 401 as an option, creating one of the most unlikely muscle sedans ever built. Picture a 4-door family car that could smoke its tires through second gear. Only about 1,000 Matadors got the 401 between 1971 and 1974. But the real unicorn was the 1971 SC360 Hornet. Wait, that doesn't have a 401, you're thinking. True, but 58 very special Hornets were built with the 401 for drag racing homologation. These cars were never sold to the public, going straight to racers. With some minor modifications, headers, slicks, and timing advance, these Hornets ran 12.9 seconds at 108 miles per hour from a compact car. In 1971, and the 401 strength wasn't just straight-line performance. Trans Am Racing had taught AMC about handling, and the 401-powered cars could corner. The Javelin AMX with the Go package included front disc brakes, heavy-duty suspension, and a twin-grip differential. These cars pulled 0.82 G on the skid pad, exceptional for the era. You could hustle a 401 Javelin through a road course and embarrass supposed sports cars. Now here's where the 401 gets really interesting. This engine was a tuner's dream before anyone used that term. The conservative factory tune left enormous potential on the table. With nothing more than headers, a proper tune, and a less restrictive air cleaner, the 401 easily produced 400 honest horsepower. Add a mild cam, intake manifold, and carburetor, and 450 horsepower was routine. The forged internals could handle it. The cooling system was overbuilt. The oiling system was race-ready from the factory. Austin drag racers discovered the 401 immediately. Wally Booth, an AMC engineer moonlighting as a drag racer, built a 401 that produced 650 horsepower and ran 10.2 seconds at 132 miles per hour in a full-weight Javelin. This was with 1971 technology, no nitrous, no forced induction, just good old-fashioned American V8 engineering pushed to its limits. The 401's development story reads like a thriller. Chief Engineer Jim Jeffords had been with AMC since the Hudson merger in 1954. He knew every trick in the book for making horsepower on a budget. The head design came from studying NASCAR engines and applying those lessons to street engines. The port shapes were tested using clay models and a flow bench borrowed from a local race shop on weekends. The forged crank was a masterstroke of purchasing genius. AMC couldn't afford to forge their own cranks, so they contracted with Kelsey Hayes, the same company that made cranks for Chrysler's Hemi. They negotiated a deal where they'd buy cranks from the same production line, just with different journal sizes. AMC got Hemi-quality cranks for 2/3 the price. And testing was brutal. Prototypes ran wide-open throttle for 100 hours straight. If anything broke, it was redesigned. One early test engine threw a rod through the block after 87 hours. The engineers discovered the rod bolts were stretching at sustained high RPM. Solution? They specified bolts from ARP, the same company that supplied NASCAR teams. Cost per engine went up $8, reliability went up infinitely, and yet the most incredible test was the Phoenix to Fairbanks torture run. An engineer drove a 401-powered Matador from Phoenix to Fairbanks, Alaska, and back. 4,800 miles. In January, temperatures ranged from 95 degrees in Phoenix to -47 in Fairbanks. The engine never missed a beat. Oil consumption for the entire trip was 1 quart in Anshan, but the 401 had an enemy more powerful than any competitor: time. By 1972, insurance companies had effectively killed the muscle car market. A 25-year-old male trying to insure a 401 Javelin faced premiums that could exceed the car payment. Emissions regulations were tightening. The first oil crisis was looming. AMC saw the writing on the wall. N10 production numbers tell the sad story. In 1971, about 2,500 performance cars got the 401. In 1972, fewer than 1,000. By 1973, it was down to 500. The last 401-powered performance car rolled off the line in early 1974. Total production over 4 years, roughly 5,000 vehicles. To put that in perspective, Chevrolet built more SS 454 Chevelle in 1970 alone than AMC built 401 performance cars ever. The 401 lived on in Jeep trucks and Matador sedans through 1979. But it was detuned and strangled with emissions equipment. The fire-breathing performance version was gone forever, or so everyone thought. Here's the thing about rare engines. They become valuable. Today, a numbers-matching 401 Javelin AMX can sell for $75,000 to $150,000. A documented SC360 Hornet with the factory 401, name your price. There might be 10 left in the world. The engines themselves, if you can find one, sell for $15,000 to $20,000 rebuilt. That's more than a modern LS3 crate engine. that makes twice the power to manage. The 401's legacy extends beyond collector value. This engine proved that innovation could triumph over resources. AMC's engineers created a big block that could run with anything from Detroit, get better fuel economy, and cost less to produce. They did it with clever engineering, not cubic dollars. The dogleg ports influenced cylinder head design for years. The forged bottom-end specification became the template for performance V8s. But wait, there's more. Let's talk about the variants nobody knows about. AMC built exactly 12 401 engines with experimental dual-plug cylinder heads in 1972, 2 spark plugs per cylinder, like a Hemi but different. These engines produced 385 advertised horsepower and were tested in police package Matadors. The project was canceled when AMC realized no police department would buy an AMC when they could get a Dodge. There was also the Ifector Group 19T racing engines. These were 401 blocks prepared by Kaplan Engineering for IMSA competition. Displacement was actually reduced to 396 cubic inches to fit class rules, but with race cams, ported heads, and 12.1 compression, they produced 485 horsepower at 6,500 RPM. 5 Javelins ran these engines in the 1972 season, winning 3 races outright. The engineering deep dive reveals more cleverness. The 401 used a gear-driven oil pump instead of a chain drive. Why? Gear drives don't stretch, maintaining consistent oil pressure for the life of the engine. The distributor was positioned at the front of the engine, not the back like GM and Ford. This reduced timing scatter and made the distributor accessible without removing anything. And yet the cooling system was over-engineered to AMC's credit. The water pump flowed 90 gallons per minute at peak RPM. The radiator had 15% more capacity than calculations required. The fan clutch was viscous coupled, engaging only when needed. Result? A 401 could idle in Phoenix traffic in August without overheating. Try that with a 454. AMC's engineers also did something unusual with the valve train. Instead of using stamped steel rocker arms like everyone else, they used ductile iron rockers with bronze bushings. Cost more? Yes. Last forever? Also yes. These rockers were so good that racers sought them out for other engines. You could buy a set of AMC rockers and adapt them to a Chevrolet. The carburation was another smart choice. AMC used Motorcraft 4300 4 barrels, the same carburetors Ford used. Why? Parts availability. AMC knew their dealers were scattered and their customers might be far from specialized help. Using Ford carburetors meant any mechanic could service them. Smart.n, and let's examine a fascinating period comparison. CarCraft magazine tested a 1971 401 Javelin against a 1971 Plymouth Cuda 446 and a 1971 Mercury Cyclone 429 CJ. The test included quarter-mile runs, 0-100 0-stopping, slalom, and fuel economy. The Javelin won the quarter-mile, tied the Cuda in braking, lost the slalom by 0.2 seconds, and destroyed both in fuel economy. The magazine's conclusion? Reese's AMC has built a world-class performance engine. Too bad nobody will believe us. The 401's true potential was demonstrated by Steve Knopfsinger, who campaigned a 401-powered Gremlin in pro stock. Yes, a Gremlin. With a distroked 401 at 366 cubic inches to meet class rules, running 14.1 compression and roller cams, the little Gremlin ran 9.50s at 138 miles per hour. It regularly beat Camaros, Mustangs, and Cudas with supposedly superior engines. In the technological achievements keep coming. AMC was one of the first to use induction-hardened valve seats, eliminating the need for lead additives. They pioneered the use of powder-forged connecting rods in some late 401s, a technology that wouldn't become mainstream for another decade. The harmonic balancer was elastomer-tuned to eliminate vibrations at specific frequencies, reducing bearing wear. But perhaps the most impressive achievement was emissions compliance. The 401 met 1973 emissions standards while still producing respectable power. How? Careful combustion chamber design created natural exhaust gas recirculation. The camshaft timing promoted complete combustion. The carburetor calibration was so precise that AMC could run leaner mixtures without detonation. When everyone else was bolting on power-robbing emissions equipment, AMC designed emissions compliance into the engine itself. The human cost of the 401's development was significant. The engineering team worked 7-day weeks for months. 2 engineers suffered heart attacks during the program, though both recovered. Jim Jeffords later said developing the 401 with such limited resources was the hardest thing he'd done in 40 years of engineering, but also the most rewarding. There's a bittersweet story about the last 401 performance engine built. On February 15, 1974, the final 401, destined for a Javelin, came off the line at AMC's Kenosha engine plant. The workers knew it was the end of an era. They all signed their names on the valve covers. That engine went into Javelin number 74A797235, which was purchased by a dealer in Milwaukee and sold to a college student who had no idea he was buying history. That car survived and sold at auction in 2019 for $127,000. Satin Ost, the 401, also had an unexpected influence on AMC's future. When Renault began their partnership with AMC in 1979, they studied the 401 extensively. French engineers were amazed that such performance could come from such a simple design. Lessons learned from the 401 influenced Renault's turbo Formula One engines in the 1980s. Think about that. A muscle car engine from Wisconsin influenced French Formula One technology, and in today, the 401 has a cult following that grows every year. The Facebook group, the AMC 401 Performance, has 12,000 members sharing technical information, dyno sheets, and restoration tips. Original parts are precious. A date-coded 401 intake manifold can sell for $2,000. The correct air cleaner assembly, $2,500. These aren't just engine parts anymore. They're artifacts of American engineering determination. And modern technology has unleashed even more potential from the 401. With aluminum heads, electronic fuel injection, and modern cam profiles, builders are seeing 550 naturally aspirated horsepower while maintaining street manners. Add a turbocharger, and 800 horsepower is achievable with the stock block. The forged internals AMC specified in 1971 are still good enough for modern power levels. The restoration community has discovered something interesting. Many 401s were saved from junkyards and stored by enthusiasts who recognized their value. There's estimated to be more 401 engines in storage than in running cars. Every year, a few more get rebuilt and dropped into restored Javelins, AMXs, and even Gremlins. Each one is a piece of history returning to life. But here's the real question. What if AMC had survived? What if the 401 had continued development? Engineers who worked on the program revealed plans for an aluminum block version that would have saved 100 pounds. There were drawings for 4-valve cylinder heads. A twin-turbo prototype was actually built but never tested. The 401 could have evolved into something truly extraordinary. And the 401 story parallels AMC's story. Brilliant engineering overwhelmed by market forces. AMC proved they could compete with anyone on performance. They just couldn't compete with economies of scale. When Chrysler bought AMC in 1987, one of the first things they did was study the 401's design. Several engineers were hired specifically for their 401 knowledge. That expertise influenced Chrysler's Magnum V8 series. And there's a deeper lesson in the 401 story about American innovation. When backed against a wall, American engineers have repeatedly done the impossible. The 401 was David's stone against Goliath's armor. It shouldn't have worked. A cash-strapped company with a tiny engineering team shouldn't have been able to create an engine that could embarrass the giants, but they did. The 401 represents something we've lost in modern automotive engineering. Today's engines are masterpieces of technology, but they're also convergent evolution. Everyone uses similar solutions because computer modeling shows the optimal design. The 401 came from an era when engineers had to trust their instincts, when unconventional solutions could still surprise everyone. And not once every surviving 401 is a monument to what's possible when engineers are told, make it work with what we have. No unlimited budgets, no supercomputers, no army of technicians, just clever people solving problems with slide rules and determination. The fact that these engines are still competitive in performance 50 years later isn't just impressive, it's inspirational. And the AMC 401 never got the respect it deserved in its lifetime. It was always the underdog, the also-ran, the engine from that other company. But time has a way of revealing truth. Today, the 401 is recognized as one of the greatest American V8s ever built, not because it was the most powerful or the most produced, but because it represented the best of American engineering ingenuity. It proved that with enough creativity and determination, you could take on the world and win. So the next time someone dismisses AMC as just a footnote in automotive history, remind them of the 401, 335 advertised horsepower that ran 14s in the quarter, an engine that got better fuel economy than its competitors while matching their performance, a design so robust that half a century later they're still being built up for racing. That's not a footnote, that's a legacy. And what's your take on the 401? Have you ever seen one in person, or better yet, driven one? Drop a comment below and share your AMC stories. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into one of America's most underrated engines, make sure to subscribe, because we're just getting started exploring the forgotten giants of American automotive engineering.